But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9.
I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all of this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 262. How wrong can one journo be? And we all know the answer to that, I think, but it's still fun to ask. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator, Lauren Brooks, and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. And we're going to continue to wade through the sludge of feminist claims about how our criminal justice system handles sexual assault allegations. Unfortunately, Allison's not with us this week to continue the article, but I think that between the three of us, we'll have plenty to say anyway. So there we go. But before we get into the article, we got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And we had our technical difficulties before the show started, so hopefully it's all good now. It looks like a couple of things. It did change one stupid thing on me, and I am going to fix that because it's going to drive me nuts. I am not selling subscriptions to this news source, so we're just going to move that up. But this article is... Why is that not moving? There we go. We're doing the electronic slide. Haha. It doesn't burn as many calories as the electric slide. Sorry, guys. But we're reading an article in the Dallas Morning News. I can't imagine everybody in the world paying 99 cents a week for that anyway. Like, we're not all from Dallas. Maybe if we were, that would be a worthwhile endeavor. But in any case, there we go.
You'll need more shootings like the one you recently had. But work on it, Dallas.
Oh no!
Wait, it wasn't a shooting. It was some kind of mass murder, whatever.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm getting them all confused now. There's more than I can keep track of these days.
Yeah,
seems insane.
It's funny because we have all this happening in the United States where there's a lot of mass crime, there's a lot of mass violence, there's a lot of mass craziness, right? Mm-hmm. But when you start to look at it, it's always it traces back to oh god, no, you don't want to see me do the electric slide, Richard Pierre. I look ridiculous when I dance. But yeah, it all ends up tracing back to things that the people who like to highlight it the most don't want to talk about, right? Like circumstances that create a mentality that is okay with the commission of crime in the individual usually include things like being raised without a father, being raised in a household that's reliant on government assistance, being raised in a household where there is a significant amount of poverty, probably due to those circumstances. No, I'm not signing in. Nag. How the heck do I get out of that? There we go. It wanted me to subscribe too, so we are actually looking at a web archive of the article, by the way. But yeah, all of this boils down to social ills that, in order to solve them, we would have to be able to criticize women's choices. And you know how much feminists love it when we criticize women's choices. Like, that's just their favorite thing in the whole world, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, and this is a similar...
You're even using the term women, which implies that women is some kind of collective.
Yeah.
That has some kind of collective blame. And how dare you?
Ha ha ha. We unfortunately are stuck with a collective lack of accountability. And that really destroys our ability to improve.
Yeah.
You can't get good if you can't be told when you're not good.
Exactly. And so I don't know if anybody has picked up on this, but a lot of times when I refer to women, I kind of exclude myself from that category because I don't want to be lumped in with the rest of these people. Like, I just don't feel like I belong to whatever this group is that they're trying to mash together, that now anything can identify as a woman, and that's what a woman is, and we're all just supposed to go along with it. I mean, above and beyond the attitudes that these women hold, like, it just is, it's absurd to me. My brain doesn't work that way. Women are just vindictive and nasty in ways that I could never think to be to another human. But
Yeah.
but I'm supposed to relate to them on some kind of level because I share the same genitalia as them or chromosomes. But no.
And
Yeah.
some women are not even women, so figure
There
out
you
how
go.
that works.
The worst part for me, honestly, is if I'm in a situation where I'm trying to correct. I've worked most of my life to try to correct some big mistakes in planning and stuff like that. And it's been something where I can look back and I can see, there are things that were harder for my husband, there were harder for my kids to deal with, harder for my parents to deal with, because I made some decisions that were unwise, right? Or I was careless and didn't make decisions, when I should have been more mindful of my actions. And there's a level of, it's great to be able to see, hindsight 2020, right, and learn from it and do better as you go on. But at the same time, it's even better if you don't have to just rely on your own hindsight. If somebody can come along and say, hey, that was really dumb, maybe you should do this next time. Or even if they have to be super nice about how they say it, which I don't think people should have to do. If you do something really dumb and other people get hurt because of it, it should be perfectly acceptable to say, hey, that was really dumb and these people got hurt, don't do it again. But unfortunately, you can't say that to women, right? So women are miserable. And women are miserable in ways that is unique to women because they can't look back at their actions and judge themselves, judge their wisdom, their morality, their ethics, and other people can't give them advice that involves holding them accountable for poor decision making. Mm-hmm. And if they do, the woman has this default glitch in the brain that comes back with, that's misogynistic, I don't have to listen to it. And of course that means the same mistakes are going to happen over and over again. This is how you end up with women that have 4 children by 4 different daddies and sitting in the welfare office working out with the lady behind the desk how to maximize her collection from the government while still collecting enough child support from each baby daddy to keep the state from going after her for not collecting child support, because the state does do that. And it's a sad situation because there she is, right, doing as much work as an office worker, a professional office worker, to get a quarter of maybe or less of what she could get if she was actually a professional, if she actually made something of herself. And instead of earning it and getting paid to produce a service or create, participate in the process of creating goods, she is stealing it from her fellow human being who worked for it and then had it taken away from them by the government. And she'll never do better because the state and the community bend over backward to accommodate her. And instead of, hey, that's really not good for you, your kids, your community, anybody really, how about we get out of that and do something better with your life that will give you a better financial circumstance and you can stop stealing from your neighbors? Instead of that, she looks at Facebook and gets Happy Father's Day to all the single moms out there who are doing both jobs.
Exactly.
When no, she's fucking not.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna go off a little bit right here. So, this is why I have no sympathy for these people, because they are victims of their own fucking circumstance, right? and this is what I was saying in the after show. I believe it was Tuesday. You know how we were talking about how women are so depressed. Well, why are women depressed? I believe that it's because they have this sense of everything should be my way, because society has just paved this yellow brick road for women to just travel down. Oh, do, and everything's happy and jolly, right? Everything's easy for them, so everything is expected. Why shouldn't they have a place to live and someone else should pay for it? You know what I mean? It becomes this sense of, yeah, I deserve it just for existing. And it's unrealistic. It is completely unrealistic, and it's unattainable for a person who has a mindset like that, because you are always then waiting for someone else to feed you. And reality, honey, wake up. You got to work someday for what you want. You know what I mean? You have to put the food in your own mouth. You can't rely on other people. And so these women go through life and they have these high expectations, these ridiculously high expectations of everything, of everyone around them, right? Because it's just mine. It belongs to me. This is my domain, and you have no right to trespass on my domain, right? This is how they go through life.
Yeah.
And when they get disappointed, when things don't go their way, it's like it's a downfall. You know what I mean? It's like it just, things start to implode. It's like, well, why doesn't this happen? And why don't I have this? You know what I mean? Why don't I have the nice house and the nice cars like everybody else has? Well, it's because maybe you don't fucking do anything to get that. You expect it to come from somewhere else.
Yeah. You know, they don't know how to twist in the situation and land on their feet.
It's not a sustainable way of living.
Nope.
You know, and so you're setting yourself up for your own downfall. And I gotta tell you, man, I'm seeing my neighbor. She's getting older, and she's still expecting for men to just pay her way, pay her entire her rent, her bills. Oh my, I don't want her to hear me. I hope she's not home, so I'm just gonna kind of clip it there. But it's unbelievable, the level of entitlement that women feel that they have for just existing, for just having a vagina and giving a man access to it. That means that she gets your wallet, she gets your time, your attention, your everything, and when she's done with you, she can just dispose of you as she sees fit.
You know, the really sad thing is you don't even have to give anything. And this is, and I've experienced this personally. This is like, I had to, when I lived up in Northwest Ohio, I used to work at a little camera store in Lima that doesn't exist anymore. And it was around the corner from my absolute favorite fast food place in the entire world, the Kewpie downtown in Lima. I used to eat there every day for like the first 6 weeks that I worked there. I ate there every day, and then I discovered that you cannot eat a cheeseburger every day and not have consequences. Actually, double cheeseburger every day and not have consequences. But I used to go there anyway. There's other things there and everything, and I liked to sit in there and work on, I was working on some writing that I was doing, had absolutely nothing to do with any of this. It was way before this. But there was a guy in there I just, started talking to, an older man, just who was chit-chatting with everybody, just like, the local guy in the local diner that gets to know the regulars at the diner and talks to everybody. So I'm talking to that guy, right? And one day it's just the two of us in there, and other people haven't come to lunch yet. And he essentially offered to be my sugar daddy. And I'm like, nope, I'm not even having that. Not that relationship, not with anybody. That's not, no, I do my thing. I earn my money. I pay my bills. I do not need or want some guy that I'm not even that involved with, like that's to do that. And, I'm like, and I'm explaining to him, I'm married, I'm getting, my shit together with my husband, I'm earning a living, we're paying our bills, we're fine, it's very kind of you to offer, but that's not the relationship I want to have with you. Like, we chit-chat, I like talking politics, it's fun to hang out, and that's the limit. And it took my whole half-hour lunch, that conversation took my whole half-hour lunch to get it established that, no, I wasn't going to change my mind on that, and no, I didn't think that was normal or a good relationship for people to have with each other. And no, I wasn't judging him for it, but he shouldn't expect that from me. And, like, it took, like, he wasn't asking me for sex, he wasn't asking me for pictures, he was just like, oh, this cute young lady, I'll see if I can help her. And it's like, it took me right back to this thing that happened when I was a really little kid, young enough to play with a rattle. And I still remember this. Like, I can see the thing I was trying to do. I can see my little hands doing it and everything. I had another toy that had a little red ball as part of the toy. It was a Christmas tree, and the little red ball went on the top. And this rattle had a handle that was round, had a hole in it for you to get a hold of it. And I looked at the ball, and I looked at the hole in the rattle, and it looked like the ball would just fit inside. And so I was trying to get it in there. And my dad was watching me. And he figured out what I was trying to do and saw that it would work. But I was very frustrated, and I kept getting more and more frustrated. So he showed me. He gave it. He had me give it to him, and he put the ball in the hole of the rattle. And that's the only time in my life I ever threw a temper tantrum. Like a real screaming, kicking. I wanted to do it myself. And, of course, Dad immediately figured that out, took it apart, handed it back to me, and I went at it again with renewed enthusiasm because now I had seen that it could be done. So I was sure, 100%, this can be done. But I had to do it. I couldn't have somebody do it for me. And that's been me all my life. And I've struggled through all kinds of things that other people tell me, oh my gosh, I can't believe you managed that. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe you survived that, And I mean, things like, an infection that actually killed the other children that got it during that season that I had it, struggling with asthma and not being able to breathe and running cross country and stuff like that. Stubbornness is very useful, right? I'm alive because I'm a stubborn ass. And I think taking that need for stubbornness and that do-it-yourself attitude and things like that away from women puts women in a situation where they're vulnerable to failure, specifically because they just don't try. Like the worst failure, if you try your hardest and you fail, if you just try your absolute hardest and you fail, you at least have the satisfaction of whatever progress you made in that effort. And you don't feel as bad about failing after trying hard because you know what your limits are there, right? But if you don't even try, and then later you discover that, well, gosh, it wasn't as hard as it looked, it wasn't as hard as it sounded, you could have done that, that's just a profoundly painful failure right there. Because it just feels like, it feels wimpy, and it feels, there's a regret, right? Things you never did, things you never tried. And I think that contributes a lot. What we were talking about last week, and where I'm going to start with the article this week, because a big part of the complaint that this writer is making is that the justice system doesn't accommodate victims enough in terms of our trauma when we report. That it bothers me that is blamed on the woman's inability to handle going through the process and having to provide detail and being asked for things that can be used as evidence in the case, like if you were brutalized, you want a medical record of that. If there was bodily contact and bodily fluids involved, you want the clothing that you had on during the assault, because it's going to be on there. There's going to be DNA, there's going to be hair, there's going to be, other things that will help the police identify the individual, or prove, if you're naming an individual, prove whether that person was the person who committed the crime. And, those things are important, right? If you want to be able to go into a courtroom and be 100% sure that you are serving the entire community, because the community is the plaintiff in a criminal case. You're going after the criminal on behalf of the community whose laws the criminal broke, right? So you want to be able to prove that you're going after the right person, and that the crime actually was committed, and those two things are essential. Because if you go after the wrong person, then in the community's name, you're falsely jailing someone. And if the crime was not committed, again, in the community's name, you're falsely jailing someone. And it is a big risk. The FBI actually did a study on how many of their convictions were overturned when they went back and, after DNA testing became useful in court, reevaluated those cases using DNA testing, where they had convicted someone based on comparisons of hair and other expert testimony on more subjective evidence. And it turns out, you can match hair between people who have no relationship to each other at all. Their hair can look the same, and you can prove that somebody who wasn't there was there based on hair that isn't theirs but looks enough like theirs that the expert was fooled. And DNA comes along and proves that actually that's somebody else's hair. So it's very important that they're able to get that evidence, because we don't want the wrong person jailed. We don't want somebody who didn't commit a crime jailed. And if there was a crime committed and you jail somebody who didn't commit it, that means the person who did commit it is still at large. And now they're off the hook because you already jailed someone else for that crime, so you're not looking for the perpetrator, right? But we're hearing in this article what we read last week, reporting the crime, right?
Can I just to follow up on a point that I think I was making like 10 minutes ago. Women shouldn't be treated like a homogenous collective, but unfortunately they are treated that way by society at large and by the government in its entirety. Not all women think the same, as you can discover from this show, if nothing else. But they are treated the same legally by the powers that be, and men are treated differently by those same powers that be. And that's what we mean when we speak of women as a collective. They are a class of people as outlined by the government. Whether they approve of it or not, they are subject to a set of laws that are different from the set of laws men face. It's much like the racial issue. That there are little to no significant differences between the races, especially not psychologically. I don't have a problem with white people. I don't have a problem with black people. I have a problem with people who have been brainwashed by racial Marxists like the grifters who call themselves BLM. That's a subset of white people and a subset of black people and a subset of other races. Black people brainwashed by BLM think they're victims of society. White people brainwashed by BLM think they're the superior race of society. Both of these subsets of people are deluded idiots, and they're both dangerous. Not because I've collectivized them, but because they've already been collectivized. And it's the same with gender.
Yeah.
Women who have been brainwashed by feminism think they're victims. Men who have been brainwashed by feminism think they're gods, basically. albeit gods of guilt. Both of these subsets of people are deluded idiots, and that's why I speak of such collective entities as men and women, and blacks and whites as and when it comes up in that context, because we live in this nightmare of identity politics, where people think along the lines of their genes and their appearance. They absolutely shouldn't do that, but unfortunately they do, and we're here to tell you that you don't have to. And yes, we're screaming into the well, but at least we're trying.
True.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's the same way I feel about it. You know, we really should not be focusing on the minutia. We should really be able to get past these things, but people are just so laser focused on the ridiculous things, the immutable characteristics of each of humanity that, you know, we want to play tug of war with over who can be the most oppressed. And it's just for what? One of you is going to fall into the dirt. The other one's sitting there holding a rope. What does that get you? You know? And God, just the pandering of the left towards Black people, like it's so patronizing.
Yeah.
And I really wish that Black people would wake up and realize that this is what's happening. You know, it's like, oh, every liberal you see that's, oh, Black lives matter. They feel that you are in a position that's inferior to them just because of the color of their skin. That's racist in and of itself. But they don't see it. They don't see it that way. They see, oh, this guy's, oh, he's out to help me. This must be my friend. No. It's not that way, you know. And if you really care about the people around you, you will try to wake them up to this shit. But some of them, you just can't shake them awake. And I don't know what to do with those people.
It's rough to deal with, and the inconsistency is rough too, because you have, and this is done with both the demographic women and the demographic Black people. It's done with minorities in general. They treat and women in particular, like it's a bigger thing when they do it with women, because they divide minorities by gender, and even bigger do it with minority women. You know, so you have this duality with women, right? They treat us like we're made of glass. Anytime we would be in a situation, if we were men, we would be expected to exercise some personal accountability, some toughness, some resilience, and just suck it up and do the thing that is difficult. You know, explain what happened to you when it was really awful and you don't like thinking about it. Okay, well, yeah, you could. It helps to remember that that's how therapy works, right? When you go to a talk therapist, the thing that they tell men they don't do enough of, and women are better at it. When you go to a talk therapist, you know what they do is they start digging into your past traumas, looking for causes for your current dysfunctions.
Mm-hmm.
And they might go all the way back to your early childhood. You know, like I tell the rattle story to explain just how much of a stubborn ass I am. But, you know, there's other stories from my childhood that I only tell when they're really relevant to a situation, because they're not something that I like thinking about. The rattle story, I don't mind thinking about that. Like, yeah, I threw a temper tantrum, but I was like, less than 2 years old. So, you know, that's about the time you're expected to try that at least once, right?
But age is a great modifier for certain situations. Like, say if you are 5 years old and you lose your mother, it has a certain influence on you and a much different impact on you. Say if you're in your 20s and your mom
or
passes,
your 50s,
right, you know,
like it always is going to hurt when it happens. It's always, but you know, it's when you're in your 50s, you kind of expect it to be coming at some point. When you're in your 20s, it's heartbreaking And when you're a child, you've just lost essential support in your life.
Yeah.
Major differences, right? But
and you have to deal with the idea of growing up, and because a part of you becomes numb to it, right? Because it happened when you were so young, and you just always grown up without your mom there.
Yeah.
And it again, that's why, like, when age is such an important factor when it comes to like the major life events when it happens to people, because it just changes the whole flavor of the rest of your life, for lack of a better term.
Well, and you process things differently as you get older because you develop tools. But what I wanted to get across with that was, when you look at how women are treated when it comes to therapy, and telling a therapist every little stinking thing about their history, like, I think if I went to a therapist, I'd probably have to dig in depth into the story of the time I got fish hooked in the mouth over a empty Faygo bottle that we wanted to collect water in to play sandcastle in the sandbox at the park with, where we shouldn't have been playing because there was cat poop. But, like, that would have been a big deal, right? That's a funny story to me now. But those same people that would want me to go in depth into all that stuff, right? And talk about everything, every little thing that has me stressed in my life, will tell me that it's just too traumatic to do the same thing if the person I'm talking to is a police officer, and the process of that conversation can result in me having some recourse against somebody that I have reason to want recourse against, that that has wronged me, and that I have a good reason to want revenge, right? Or at least justice, where I can be heard and they can be heard, and get to the bottom of the matter, and a decision is made on how to reform the individual, and how to penalize them for what they did. Like that, all of a sudden, it's too traumatic because now a police officer might do something to the person who hurt you. I think that's kind of stupid, but that's what we're told, right? We're told that reporting a sexual crime, a sexual assault, can be traumatic. Like, we read this last time. They have to go through this SANE exam, which there are exams that you have to go through in your life as a woman that are somewhat similar. Like, I don't know if they always use, like, all the same equipment, but women's exams are not comfortable. They're not that much more uncomfortable, I think, than men's exams. But women's exams are not comfortable. They're not fun. They're kind of some exams are a real pain in the ass, especially if you're going to a gastroenterologist, right? Actually, that one's not as bad as it used to be. But what I mean is, like, you do this in your life on a regular basis. The gyno visit is supposed to be an annual thing, right? And then you're supposed to get your boobs smashed in a vise and x-rayed like every 5 years or so. And more frequently if your family is prone to breast cancer. Like, these are things that are normal, right? It might feel a little more traumatic for a lot of women after a sexual assault, but a good medical staffer can normalize that experience too. So
it's traumatic. It's traumatic for me because I'm now at the age where my doctor is telling me that they want to smash my boobs and stick a camera up my butt, and it just doesn't sound as fun as it was in my 20s, maybe.
Yeah.
But
exactly. Yeah. And it's all this stuff. I'm not gonna say that it's not traumatic to go through the process of documenting a sexual assault. But it's not prohibitively traumatic, right?
Yeah.
Because your goal, again, is getting some recourse against the person who hurt you. It's like working to build something, working to create something. You're part of a project. The project is, we're going to get that asshole. That's the project. And your part of the project is, whatever that asshole left behind on you, they want to discover it so that they can use it against them. Right? That's your part of the project. And if you're telling the truth about the experience that you are recounting to law enforcement and to hospital personnel, then you're basically, your biggest fear is that they can't get enough, right? They can't get enough evidence to complete the project, get that asshole. But if you're lying, then your biggest fear is going to be that they're going to find out you're lying, right? That would be traumatic. It's not traumatic to go through that process, to try as hard as you can and just miss the mark.
Yeah.
Because you've done, at least, that you've done everything you can to get that asshole. And if that asshole gets away with it, they have a suspect for the next crime. And they have as much evidence as you could give them. And that may contribute to another case down the line. And you've done your part. And that actually is very therapeutic. But no, what do we get told? Women are made of glass. When women have to be accountable for something, women are made of glass, right? When women have to be accountable for an action that should be taken, for undertaking that action themselves, we just, in fact, we might even be sugar glass, gonna melt, gonna shatter, no toughness whatsoever. So you just can't go to the hospital for treatment for your injuries and a rape kit and evidence gathering to get that asshole, because it's just too much. It's just too traumatic, right? But when the woman is the perpetrator, when the woman is the person who hurt someone, like when someone else is cut by that glass, oh wait, no, women are not made of glass. They're made of marshmallows. Why are you afraid of marshmallows? What's wrong with you? Are you a marshmallow-misogynist?
No, I like mine toasted with some chocolate and some graham crackers.
That sounds like alcohol facilitated s'mores.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that. So that's this whole paragraph about victims reporting and what victims have to go through after reporting. That pisses me off because it discourages women from taking the steps needed to hold accountable people who did them harm. And what did we learn about rapists when we looked into like the prevalence research and self-reported perpetration? But that the overwhelming, something like 95 or 96% of rape is committed by this tiny percentage, like somewhere like 4 or 6% of perpetrators who are serial violent offenders in multiple ways, not just sexual violence. And just sexual violence is included in the types of violence they engage in. So you have this phenomenon where we are telling, as a society, we are telling women, it's just too hard to hold the person who hurt you accountable. You would have to go through this terrible process of building a case against this asshole, telling your story, and giving your complaint, and collecting, the game pieces we're going to use to go after this person. And we're just going to let this person, who has a high chance of being a serial perpetrator, get away with what they did to you and go after the next person. Brilliant! But since we did read that paragraph before, we'll go on to that. I just had to make that point because I'm sure you guys can tell. Like that just really sticks in my craw. Like that just. Are we really that dumb as a society? And yes, we are. Yes, we are.
and getting dumber by the day.
Yeah. And so it goes on. Many police departments exacerbate this problem when they misunderstand the role that trauma plays in a victim's behavior. When investigators aren't trained in trauma-informed practices, they might use interrogation tactics on victims, which only makes the process more traumatizing. And what they're really saying here is they don't want police to vet allegations for validity or believability, credibility, anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do they think is going to happen when you get into court?
Exactly. You're going to be run up and down the ringer, ma'am. So get your story straight. And if, I understand all of this, right? But here's the thing. It's kind of like watch a lot of these body cam videos, and it's like, they get pulled over for, DUI or whatever, like, and they just start fighting with the cops. It's like, well, no, I shouldn't have to. You're just making it worse for yourself.
Yeah.
If you're really innocent, if all you had was a blown out brake light, just pull over and be kind, and take the ticket. But these people, some people, fight back, and I don't understand what that is. It's like this reaction, this negative reaction to authority or being told what to do. But in this instance, like if you're trying to report a trauma and you really want this person to get caught, then why wouldn't you just comply? Why wouldn't you just say, listen, this hurts, and you can cry all the tears you want, but the ultimate goal is getting justice for yourself because you feel that you've been wronged.
Yeah.
The terms entitlement and fragility spring to mind.
Yes.
But they only apply to the bad people, so what am I thinking?
See, the rough thing about it is I think a lot of times we hear this advocated for by women who are not used to working for what they get in life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing. If you are never expected to earn anything, you develop. Well, it's the same as if you're never expected to go and do anything. If you sit around your house all day, if you let yourself get out of shape, then when something comes along like, oh shit, you gotta move. You actually have to move to a new home. Now you have to gather up all your shit and put it in a truck and go. And all of a sudden, that is hard work. Where, if you actually were used to getting up and moving around a lot all the time, lifting and carrying things all the time, it's still work, but it's not nearly as hard. And it's that way with mental exercise. It's that way with psychological exercise. If you never do the heavy lifting, if you atrophy in your home, or in your little bubble, your little plastic bubble, then when something comes along that you really can't get out of doing the work for it, you're screwed. You don't have the guts to go talk about your problem. You don't have the guts to work to build that case. And it does take away the experience of helping the authorities track down and, penalize the asshole that hurt you. So you basically lose out. And, of course, the community loses out because the asshole gets to go on and hurt somebody else, too.
Exactly.
So, and that's a really sad situation. And that goes right back to, when women are expected to take action, when accountability means you have to do something about your situation, women are made of glass. And, of course, the other end of it being that when accountability means that you have to take responsibility for having done something bad, women are made of marshmallows. It's the strangest thing, you know, those damned reflective marshmallows. So it says many police departments exacerbate this problem when they misunderstand the role that trauma plays in a victim's behavior. What they're really saying there is don't expect women to be honest if they've been traumatized, which is bull. Trauma can do weird things to you, but it doesn't make you dishonest. It doesn't take away your ability to tell the truth and to stick with the truth and to refrain from embellishing or changing details in order to protect yourself. Right? That's not how trauma works.
Certainly not if it's a one-off event. If it's a repeated pattern of abuse, then people can develop what's loosely called Stockholm syndrome, but that's, I guess, for terrorists. But a lot of victims of repeated abuse sort of are in that position in the first place because they justify everything that happens to them. And by no means does this happen to women more than it happens to men. I would
probably the other way around, actually.
Yeah,
but
I would wager it's the other way around. But
it's not trauma though that makes that happen. That is more like a lot of times with men who are abused. You know, you marry someone or you move in with someone because you love them, right? You want to be with that person, and when men fall in love, when men really get dedicated to a woman, they get these blinders. All of a sudden they fail to see any ugliness in her. And it's not necessarily all men are like that, and it's not necessarily, you know, that there's no point at which they're going to notice, but men put up with a lot of shit from women. And they're told by society that they have to, for starters. They do it all their lives. They grow up.
Especially their mothers, by the way.
Where they grow up with the whole ladies first thing that, you know, nobody tells them that more than ladies, right?
Yeah.
But they get used to this idea that, you know, you subjugate your interests, you subvert your interests to make sure hers are taken care of first, right? That's the norm. Men who are more aware of the current legal situation are waking up to that and doing it less. But the gynocentric norm is still that, in general, as a demographic, men get abused by women all the time, and they put up with it because they're told they have to. So, if a woman's abusive behavior is maybe a little bit more dramatic than the rest of the women who abuse that man, to him, it's just a little bit more abuse. Well, you know, I love this woman, so it's okay if she abuses me more than the other women, right? And that's why I think a lot of guys do put up with that. And they may not even, you know, if you think of a behavior as normal, then you're not going to think of it as abuse, are you? Like back in the day when spanking was normal, most people would laugh at you if you called it abuse. I think we've gotten to the point where it's not just not the norm, but it's really abnormal now. And most people would tell you you're going way overboard. It's not necessary. Just, you know, don't do it. And they would consider it abuse. It's like we've flipped on that. We've really moved the Overton window on that.
Yeah, and then on the other hand, we have I think we're leaning more towards is parents who don't know how to discipline their children at all, and they are just running roughshod over society now, right? And you know what is anyone supposed to do? But hey, that's it. All right, you know, until the child becomes of age, you can't really charge them with a legal crime. So I don't know. I don't know.
You can. You can. There's juvenile detention. Actually, if I remember right, I've read a statistic somewhere. The United States incarcerates more children than any other country in the world. That's like you can do awful things to children using the state, and the state can get away with it, and they basically enslave them. So and 95% of the children they do this to are boys, and many of them have mental health conditions. And they actually use solitary confinement in juvenile detention, too.
I really don't see how we don't view this as a societal ill that needs to be taken care of, rather than, oh, these are the wrong ones, and let's just throw them away, lock them up, and that'll take care of that. No. There needs to be some real fucking reform in this society. There needs to be some real accountability held to the parents of these children. And I'm not saying just mothers. Obviously, I do believe that it's mostly the mother's fault in many of these cases. Not all, but in the worst
a rather
ones,
large percentage of them.
And the worst ones,
the mother is a single mother.
Exactly. And again, in the worst cases, there's absolutely a single mother, or it's a single mother with her new boyfriend, and she's got a new kid by the new man.
Of the week.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But the police just don't understand that they have some underlying trauma. So, it's the police's fault.
Of course.
That's why we can't accurately report these things. No, I think we can't accurately report these cases because a lot of people fucking lie.
Yeah.
And it's the elephant in the room that nobody really wants to touch, right? Because it's just fucking blatantly obvious. And now I'm not saying that most of these people are lying when these things happen. Obviously, that's not the case. But when it is the case, it needs to be pointed out like it's the fucking elephant in the room.
Well, it would help if there are process crimes, right? We know about process crimes. People should know about process crimes due to the news cycle of the last 4 years in the United States, the last 6 years now in the United States. Process crimes should be a subject that people are quite familiar with now. Well, if somebody goes to the police and files a false complaint, that is a crime. If in the course of filing that false complaint, during the investigation process, after they've filed that complaint, when the police start asking them questions about the details of the complaint, if they lie to the police during that investigation, that is another crime. Mm-hmm. And then if they push that lie through the prosecuting attorney's office and into a courtroom, and they lie under oath, that's another crime. Mm-hmm. And if somebody does that, right, during one of these cases, it should be automatic if it's blatantly obvious that the allegation itself is a lie, and that details given in support of that allegation are lies because they are based on an initial lie, that you should have to prosecute for that if you were prosecuting the person who was lied about, the false allegation victim. Now, on behalf of society and that victim, you should be prosecuting the false accuser.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And again, that's another answer to this question. Why can't we prosecute sexual assault properly? Or why are we so bad at prosecuting sexual assault? It's because we don't give a fuck when there are these false allegations made. It's just like, oh, whatever. There's no punishment for people who lie about these things. So how is anyone to take it seriously if you can just, do something like this and ruin a person's life?
Yeah.
Hello, Brian Banks. And there's nothing that happens to these people. Not all, again, not all, but when it happens, it's just a smack in the face of the actual victims of crimes like this.
Yeah, the
Because
the 7 years in hell case I talked about before, and how the accuser added rape to her list of allegations, and then she changed her story like multiple times, like 3 or 4 times. She changed the location, she changed the time, the date, everything about the story except who she was accusing, right? It was provably false. Like she could not find a time when he wasn't accounted for, because we were actually making sure that he could prove where he was and what he was doing all the time. So there was never going to be a time that he wasn't accounted for. By the time she got done changing her story, there was zero doubt left. There was zero room left for doubt that she lied. She knew it didn't happen, and she said it happened anyway. Do you think there was any accountability at all?
of course not. Of
Zip.
course not.
None.
Of course not. And that's the other thing that these false allegations do, is they soak up the court's time to actually take care of cases where real fucking assaults happen. And that pisses me off more than anything else.
Yeah.
Right? You're sitting in the court lying and trying to use your fucking children as pawns against these people that you chose to have children with. But now you feel aggrieved in some sort of way. Again, this is why women are depressed, because they expect this fucking fairy tale life and it doesn't fucking work out. And so what do? They try to take revenge on everyone around them. This is why they're fucking depressed. This is why they can't handle life, because life is not the way life does not read your fucking diary, okay?
In the immortal words of Marvin the Paranoid Android, life. Don't talk to me about life. Somebody was saying on Twitter a little bit before the show that life sucks and then you die. That's the natural order of things, right? Yeah. The natural order of things is that life sucks and then you die, unless you take action yourself to make your life better.
Right.
It is your job as a human being. That is what you're here to learn how to do, is to achieve, maybe not necessarily what many people think of happiness as, like, woohoo happiness, but contentment, love, connection with other people, and success in an endeavor that contributes to the community where you live. Right? Those are things that's what you're here for. And if you just let life suck instead, and you never take action to reduce how much life sucks and make it better, you don't get to blame everybody else, unless you're a woman, and then you do, unfortunately. And that's why women don't improve their lives beyond life sucks. But honestly, women pathologize everything. I don't necessarily think women are more depressed than men on the scale that surveys say. I think women claim to be suffering more than they are suffering.
Exactly. Yeah. Women are more aggrieved. Mm-hmm. Men have real reasons to want to end their lives.
Right? Well, and the thing is, men will limp along, and they'll be glad that they got to go to a baseball game, or they'll be glad that this person is in their life, or they'll be glad that they achieved this project at work, and people are proud of them, and they're proud of themselves. Right? They'll be glad that they get time with their children, even if it's a little bit of time. They'll be glad for that amount of time before they start even thinking about how much it sucks to not have the rest of the time. And men are happier than women because of that. Even in miserable situations, women make themselves more miserable, and then they spread that misery as much as they possibly can by bitching about it. And
exactly.
It's an unfortunate reality. And unless you grow up in a family where you are not permitted to do that, that is a behavior that children will do. Mm-hmm. But when you grow up and you're not permitted to do that, you grow out of it. Right? And boys are not permitted to do that. Girls are unfortunately permitted to do that, and so many of them never grow out of it, whereas boys generally do. And you can always tell a guy that grew up in a family where he was permitted to do that, because he'll behave so differently from the rest of the men around him that it gets on everybody's nerves, right?
Yes.
And those are a lot of times those are the guys that engage in behaviors that people think are borderline. Not always. Sometimes it's because they have a disorder that makes them clueless, or they've never been socialized around other people very well. But most of the time, or there's also like sociopaths will mimic that, and psychopaths will mimic that as best they can. But it is really, it is something that gets trained out of boys as they are growing up. And I think there's more of a natural tendency to grow out of it in boys as well, but it doesn't get trained out of girls. And I don't think there's as much of a natural tendency to grow out of it if it's not trained out of them. And what you end up with then is the girl that will tell no one for 20 years that she felt wronged by this guy. And then when she does talk about it 20 years later, instead of talking about what really happened, she talks about it as though it's 10 or 20 times bigger and badder than it really was.
On the subject of spanking, sorry, I'm late to the show again. But
don't worry about it.
On the subject of spanking, we speak like it's a practice that's been stigmatized in the last few generations. But what's specifically been stigmatized is when fathers do it.
Mm-hmm.
It was only the generation before mine, namely the boomers, when it was still normal for a father to spank a child, specifically a boy. I don't think it's ever been acceptable for a father to spank his infant daughter. But not long ago, it was even acceptable practice for a father to beat his son, like with a belt or what have you, as and when he transgresses against his mother's wishes. And usually it's at the command of the mother in question. The only thing that's changed in the past few generations is that it's no longer okay for a father to lay a hand, let alone a belt, on a child, even a son. That and the very idea of fathers has been stigmatized, and we're left with this glut of single mothers. The idea
Very good points.
The idea of a mother clocking her son around the head is still fine. Even her daughter, come to think of it. You'll notice it's not even called spanking when mothers do it. It's not called anything if a mother beats her son or daughter about the head with her hand or with whatever weapon is available. It's just called, well, it's not called anything. It's called mothering, if anything. It's called, well, I have to do this.
Right.
Because I'm raising these children by myself through no choice of my own. What else am I supposed to do? Allow the father to help in some way? That's clearly not an option. He's far more useful to me as a remote wallet. And so children in this day and age don't grow up with the optional punishment of a father, a pissed off father, simply growling at them or giving them the stink eye, just letting them know very subtly just how
disappointed
I am, which is a very effective parenting method, by the way, which children do understand, and it involves zero violence, and it's something that fathers have also done for generations. Fathers that never laid a hand to their children because they didn't have to, because they were able to just give them that stink eye. Right. But what we're left with in this day and age is the absolute normalization of women, single mothers, just beating the shit out of their children. And then we wonder why children grow up to be violent and why society in general is mysteriously becoming so much more violent. It's because, well, women would never be violent, especially not mothers. Women can't be violent. If we get men out of the family, they will become magically, utterly non-violent. If we get men out of society, then society will become magically non-violent. Hasn't quite worked out that way, has it?
You know, my dad had a philosophy on discipline. My parents both had like very compatible philosophies on discipline, but my dad in particular had a very interesting one. you don't discipline by scaring the child. You discipline by demonstrating, annoyance with the behavior by annoying. And this, as an educator, and as a male educator, he always had to be careful putting his hands on kids. You can't just spank somebody's kid. Now, during the early 70s in education, spanking was fairly normal. But as you got up into the 80s, it became, very much controversial. And in particular, they didn't allow the men to do it because that was a false allegation danger right there, especially if the girls didn't get paddled as often as boys did to begin with. It's always been a unfair thing, but boys' behavior was treated more harshly always, as far as I know. At least during my entire school career it was. But Dad didn't like doing any of that. His idea was you sort of follow the rule from the cask of Amontillado. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not a big drinker, so I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But that was in the story. The main character gets revenge on someone who has wronged him by tricking him to come into his wine cellar to try the cask of this great wine. But then he actually slowly walls him up behind a brick wall in there. And, where he's never going to get caught for having committed this crime. But the person he's punishing knows that, he's being punished. He knows what he's being punished for. And he knows who's punishing him. And so there's no consequence for the punisher, just the punished. Well, you can't really say that about things like paddling, detention, anything that puts the punisher in a position where they're at risk of again, a false allegation or being forced to use their time. So my dad would do things like instead of a after-school detention, the student would have to come and stop in to his classroom for 2 minutes at the beginning of lunch period. Just enough to make them last in line. Not enough to take up a bunch of his time. And they knew they were being punished. They knew what they were being punished for. Right? They knew who was doing the punishing and everything, and they knew that not engaging in that behavior again would avoid that punishment for that behavior. And that was good enough. If he had a student that he needed to explain why the behavior was wrong, then they'd have a talk. But that's not punishment, that's mentoring. Right? If you just have a student that you're handing a punishment down to, that's how you handle it. Spanking is useless in that situation. I had a classmate that, you could have beaten the hell out of him. You could have left bruises, you could have left welts, you could have burned him. Wouldn't have mattered. He wouldn't have had any reaction to that at all. But one day he was bullying me, and I told him off, and I pulled out every $5 college word I could in the course of telling him off, which clearly demonstrated that my vocabulary was far more advanced than his, and it embarrassed him. He left me alone after that. He never bothered me again. Never laid a finger on him. Wouldn't have won if I had. He weighed more than me by as much as I weighed, I think, just about. And there was just, besides the fact that he was a dude and he was going to be stronger than me and faster than me anyway, right? But I was stronger and faster than him verbally. And that was the end of it. I won that fight without ever having to hit him. I never have to remember doing anything really mean to him. He was embarrassed momentarily, and there weren't really enough people around for it. People weren't talking about it for weeks and weeks. Everybody forgot about it by the next day. But he didn't do that again, because he knew he wasn't going to win. He's never going to win that fight. He would have had to put hands on me to win a fight with me, and he wasn't going to do that, because every guy in the school would have looked down on him for it. So like that's how you handle when you're dealing with somebody like that. That's how you handle that kind of like either mentoring or punishment. You're like, all right, I will show that I am bigger and stronger than you in this way, and I will show that you will have a consequence, even if it's not violent. And in fact, it makes a bigger difference. As he was nicer to other people too after that. And just like I was more careful about certain things after Mom made me pay for the neighbor's window that I broke when I climbed the walnut tree I wasn't allowed to climb and knocked a walnut down, and it ricocheted off branches and into the stupid window. Like, it ricocheted off multiple branches and into the stupid. It was like God was directing this stupid walnut just so that I would get in trouble and learn that lesson. But in any case, yeah, that's how you handle that kind of thing. But for a long time, yeah, spanking and violence were the norm. And in particular, women would use those punishments a lot, but they would make the dad do it. Wait till your father gets home.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to actually have to remember doing this to you, but it's done. You're still going to experience it. But my hands are clean because wait till your father gets home. I'm going to nag him into doing it.
Right.
Now it's just wait till the police get here.
I know. That's even worse because once upon a time, years ago, you used to be able to take a profoundly disturbed child through the legal system to get to psychological treatment that was actually effective. Now, they just get abused. And that's sort of where we end up with the future perpetrators, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But going on with this article, so we did talk before about the claims about police investigation, and then the other claim. We're going to revisit the other claim here. We read before the consensus among academic researchers seems to be that between 2 and 10% of reports are false. But I want to remind everybody that is based on studies that were done using a standard that didn't allow any vetting of the reports for validity or for holes and flaws. So only if the accuser recanted, or the holes and flaws were so obvious that the detective didn't have to look for them, did they consider those reports to be false. No investigation, right? And they still found a higher percentage of false reports than they're able to convict. So reports that can be confirmed, absolutely confirmed true, are much lower in number, right? But they don't like to count that as the entirety of true reports, do they? They always like to say, well, all the reports that are in doubt could be true. What do they say about false reports? It's important to note that every study, she says, I could find analyzing false reports relied on what percentage of reports were marked false by the police, not the number of people successfully prosecuted for filing false reports. So by saying that, this writer establishes that a report is only false if prosecution of the person who lied is successful. Mm-hmm. So if they're never prosecuted, the report can't be false based on that standard, right?
Right.
Which, if we apply that standard to sexual violence, then the reports cannot be valid unless they're prosecuted either. So all reports that are not made to police, that are just made to surveys or to shelter personnel, and so on, like therapists and stuff, those are all not valid reports according to the standard they want to apply to false reports.
Which says nothing of the completely unreported crimes, which we can tell you definitively is just through the roof. Like, how do you know that if they're not reported? We just know. We just Just trust us. Just take my word for it. Okay. And what about the unreported cases of men and boys being shut up? That never happens.
Exactly. So if we want to look at how many reports are actually false, I think we should consider some things like like I said before, the FBI found that when they had relied on hair matching and stuff like that, 25% of the convictions that they went back and investigated with DNA testing afterwards turned out to be false. 1 in 4. That's a pretty high level there. That's not necessarily meaning that there was no crime, but that the allegation against the accused was false. The accused didn't commit the crime. So that's pretty bad, right? And then you have McNamara, I think, was the one that was 65%, and Canaan was the one that was 40%. And some of those involved instances where the accuser didn't want to take a lie detector test, so they recanted, right? Because they're afraid they would get caught lying. Feminists like to claim that was because people don't trust lie detectors, but I think it's more because people were afraid that they would get caught lying. And then there are other sources that have even higher rates, but I'm not sure of those studies. So if someone wants to ask me, in the United States, what's the actual rate of false allegations? It could be as low as 10%. I don't think it is. It could be as high as 65%. Well, in India, there was a evaluation done by the Hindi in Delhi on rape allegations, and they found a 65% confirmed false rate. Like out of the chute, 65% of their allegations that they investigated were false. Not in doubt, but definitely, unquestionably false. Where the woman was alleging rape based on her feelings in a situation, not based on the law. And then there's another 20% that was in question. So it could be as high as 85%. Now, in India, one of the contributing factors was it's not legally considered rape to breach a promise to marry in India after you've had sex with your fiance. Like in the United States, we don't have that issue. Nobody thinks that that's rape. In India, there's a cultural belief that that's rape. And then the other thing is, in India, there's arranged marriage, and there are circumstances where parents make rape allegations against men their daughters run away with, instead of marrying who mom and dad are telling them who to marry. And that's not really a big factor in the United States either. So you don't have grown women running off with grown men and then that man being accused of rape by her parents because they don't want her to marry that guy. And they expect the police to stop the wedding. So those factors, I would say 65% is probably a high number in the United States. Probably I'm closer to believing that 40% number, but it's very possible that 65% is correct, because it is, like I said, it's confirmed in India, and it's the low number in India. Like, that's just it blows your mind when you think about it. That many people would just flippantly, falsely accuse somebody of a serious crime in a country where that crime is even more harshly punished than it is here. But there you go. When you're entitled, you're entitled. So when this individual talks about false allegations as a rarity, it's important to note what she says. Still, there's a persistent idea in American society that it's common for women to lie about being raped. Well, it's possible that it is. And we can't trust research that minimizes that on the basis of not vetting the allegation for falsehood. It's very possible that it is. And until we have a study that digs into allegations and analyzes every detail, analyzes the evidence, and then comes back and says, well, a low percentage of these, very low percentage of these were confirmed false. And then there was another percentage that was in doubt, but we couldn't confirm true or false. And admits that there's a percentage that's confirmed false and a percentage that's unknown that might be false also. We aren't going to have a good statistic here for this issue. But the writer goes on. False reports do happen, and when they do, they go viral. Right? So that's another weasel statement. Right? Imagine if we said, rape happens, and when it does, it goes viral. It implies that if a rape doesn't make the news, it didn't happen.
God.
If the crime isn't famous, it didn't happen, right? If you're not the person that every newspaper in the country decided to use as the example to try to get due process compromised again, you didn't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, rape reports go viral before they're even confirmed as true or false.
Some do.
We've been talking about stuff like this for fucking 10 years now. There have been a number of famous cases, like the Duke Lacrosse thing and the thing that was in Rolling Stone,
Mm-hmm.
and the guy who. The guy who had sex with a sleep woman in a dumpster, whatever it was.
Oh, you're talking about Brock Turner, yeah.
Brock Turner,
Yes.
There's been loads of cases like that. They go viral when they are assumed to be true rapes, and then they get buried when they are confirmed to be false.
And then they get rewritten too, like the Brock Turner story. He wasn't convicted of rape, but today, if you ask a feminist, she'll say he was convicted of rape, and then he only got sentenced to 3 months in jail, which isn't true. He was convicted of sexual assault. He was not convicted of rape, and it is a state that has rape conviction. He got sentenced to 6 months for the lower crime that he wasn't even charged, if I remember right, with rape. And that just it disappeared when you talk about this. It just gets rewritten.
So what does it tell you? That people have to fabricate cases of rape in order to make them go viral?
Mm-hmm.
But every now and again you'll get a confirmed false report that goes viral because it's fucking confirmed.
Yep. And the sad thing is, like, there are real crimes that happen all the time. There are convictions. There are cases that could be confirmed that don't go viral, and it's because the person is tried. They're arrested. They're investigated. They're interrogated. They're jailed. They're tried. They're convicted, and they go on a sex offender list. They go to jail for years. When they get out and they're on probation, they have a bunch of things they have to perform. They have to go check in every week. They have therapy they have to go to. They have all these things they have to do, right? There's punishment. There's efforts at reform, treatment. Whether it works or not, I'm not sure that I trust the state to do therapy. I don't really trust the state to do anything, so I guess that's not surprising. But
If
Those don't
false,
go viral because they can't use them to say that people don't punish rape, that the state doesn't punish rape.
if every false report, or even close to a majority of false rape reports, went viral, there would be nothing in the news but the cases of false rapes. But we get one every now and again,
Yeah.
even in the mass media, and nobody covers it after the fact except us here at Honey Badger Radio.
Yep. And the sad thing is, this there's never any accountability for it either. You don't see even when these cases go viral, you don't see any recourse for the victims of the false allegations against the accusers. Mattress Girl got to continue to play victim for quite a while, a couple of years after. Like she made a lifestyle out of a form of artistic expression out of playing victim, of being accountable, in which she wasn't, for having made a false allegation. I mean, it's pathetic. And it's horrible that the accused never really had any recourse, never got justice, right? We worry about women getting justice when they make an allegation, but we don't worry about the men they accuse getting justice when that accusation turns out to be a lie. It's even less considered than the justice that men deserve when they're the victims and the perpetrator is female. But and when they're the sexual assault victims and the perpetrator is female, because I doubt that there's many instances of false allegation of any type of violence that a man can be taken seriously making against a woman.
Why have we never seen a case in any mainstream media site of a man falsely accusing a woman of rape?
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been any reporting on that.
I presume it can happen. It just, and maybe even it has, but for one reason or another, we never hear about it.
Well, for starters, in order to falsely accuse a woman of sexual violence against him, a guy has to get first past the hesitance men have to admit to being dominated by a woman in any way. Because men do get treated like it's their fault if something like that happens, even though they're not allowed to fight back.
You would think the largely feminist mainstream media would be all up on that if it ever did happen, and they could let the public know that, look, there are men falsely accusing women of rape all up and down the country because of this one case we found. But it never happens. I mean,
the only crime.
I guess they don't want to know. They don't want to let anyone know that it's even possible for a man to accuse a woman of rape, whether it's true or false.
Yeah.
They want everyone to believe that rape is something that is only done by men to women, which legally speaking it is in my country, and I guess it is in a lot of other countries. And so, of course, it's not a story if there's no such thing as a woman raping a man. I mean, a man literally can't accuse a woman of rape in my country because there's no such crime.
Nope, they label it, they put it under the umbrella of other sexual assault, and when you bring it up to politicians from your country, they will claim that they don't think that needs to be changed because there is for serious sexual assault, there's a penalty that's exactly the same as the penalty for rape. But it's not. It's not exactly the same. There is a huge difference, for instance, between calling somebody a rapist and calling somebody a pedophile. And if you were to say, well, when men commit the crime, since we label forced sex rape when men do it. We won't call them pedophiles. We'll only call women pedophiles. We're going to call men rapists when they do it. Women would go through the roof. They would be livid. But they're perfectly fine claiming it's exactly the same punishment if you give the same number of years in prison and the same requirements for reforming behaviors afterwards and being tracked and everything, but you don't apply the stigma of the label rapist to women. You only apply the stigma of the label rapist to male perpetrators, right? That's not a difference, right? That's no big deal. It's just, they get to go wherever they want and do whatever they want without being called a rapist. No big deal. So, yeah, it's not the same punishment. And it's never going to be the same punishment until they label the crime for both sexes. They stop requiring a penis to be used in perpetration. But, going on with the article, so we've established that it's the initial thing about only 0.8% of rapes leading to a conviction. That turned out to be bullshit. Right? The idea of failure among police because women aren't reporting, that's bullshit. Right? The idea of false allegations being rare as a confirmed statement that we should make decisions based on that claim, that turned out to be bullshit. So now we have all of the details on which this woman, I can't remember whether this author is male or female, but this author is basing the advice we're about to hear. All three of the main conditions are bullshit. So we have our house of cards. So we're going to scroll down a little bit here. Next is there aren't reliable statistics about rape investigations. So I've skipped a bunch of text. If you guys want to Control F, that's what you should look for. There aren't reliable statistics about rape investigations. And it goes on, police departments are often shrouded by nature. Mysterious police department. Nobody even knows where it is. And to be fair, many cases aren't easy to run down. Nonetheless, we should recognize that when only about 20% of rape investigations lead to arrest, something isn't working the way it needs to. So if we aren't arresting enough people that are investigated, we should just assume it's because the investigation isn't being done right and not that it's either proved that some are innocent or that there's not evidence to prove that some are guilty, at least not enough to bring a case. Even when an arrest is made, it goes on, prosecutors exercise immense discretion when it comes to what cases they pursue. So they want to take away prosecutorial discretion that is used to prevent the prosecutor from wasting thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars on cases they cannot win, and to keep them from prosecuting people who are not guilty. Many are very good about going after these crimes, but we shouldn't automatically believe that all of them are pursuing all of the cases they should. The city of Austin is currently facing a civil suit alleging gender discrimination for its handling of sexual assault cases. According to the suit filing, of the 224 cases referred to prosecutors by police between 2016 and 2017, the district attorney's office accepted only 77. Of those 77, only one went to trial. The victim in that case was a man. Ha! So they're mad. They're mad that the other cases weren't prosecuted. But if the other cases weren't prosecuted, what do prosecutors run for office on? Have you ever seen a prosecutor run for office advertising that they suck at their job before Antifa and Black Lives Matter? I don't know, either one of you?
I mean, I can't remember what happened before Black Lives Matter. But I mean, Biden's in office right now, and he's done nothing but advertise how shit he is at his job.
Well, that's true.
But this was right after those things you specified.
Like, it's interesting that they didn't look at cases prior to that. And I'm kind of wondering, what was the pattern in that city between, say, 2012 and 2013, as opposed to 2016 and 2017? Because we had the defund the police movement and the we're not prosecuting violent crimes movement taking place in the United States from about 2015, 2016 on. Like, that's been going on. It went on through the entire Trump administration. And you have not just in Austin, but in several cities in California. I think there are cities in Indiana, Wisconsin. There's been Chicago. Chicago's a big one. Like, where they're just not prosecuting. They're not prosecuting burglars. They're not prosecuting rapists. They're not prosecuting murderers. They're not prosecuting muggers. They're not prosecuting.
I heard it was Republicans who wanted to defund the police.
Yep, so we hear that all the time.
It must be their fault that criminals aren't being prosecuted in all these Democrat-run cities. Makes sense to me.
Yep, all those Republicans marching down the street on video, chanting about wanting dead cops now, definitely were at fault for this. But, I mean, it's interesting that they chose to specifically look at a time frame after we started having a regular phenomenon of defunding police and defunding prosecution of crime in general. And they looked at this, but did they also look at how this prosecutor handled burglary, shoplifting, Grand Theft Auto, not the video game, again, mugging on the street, assault and battery, like all of the various things that you can prosecute somebody for that involve violence or theft of property or both. Those are things that are usually pretty heavily prosecuted. Like drug crimes, did they suddenly stop prosecuting drug crimes? Like, they usually go after drug crimes, like a pit bull. But I think that would be a relevant bit of information that's not included in this article. Seems kind of biased, if you ask me. And in the meantime, the one victim in that one case, it seems to be galling to this individual that they prosecuted the case, or that the case they did prosecute, the victim was a man. Now, why would that make a difference? Why would that matter if the victim was a man? So, her claim, I keep saying her, I'm going to go to the top and look here real quick. Yep. This is an opinion piece, by the way, just so everybody knows. Yep, and it's Lisa Anderson, or Liza Anderson, actually. So...
You're not just going to assume this person's gender, are you?
That's a female name, so either this person identifies as a woman, or is biologically female and is giving their female name. But yeah, where we were here, I'm not far enough down there. City of Austin. Okay, so she says, and why are rape convictions so hard to secure? Prosecutors say that juries don't trust victims either. Again, juries don't trust accusers. And this is an automatic belief that isn't merited, right? Trust. You shouldn't trust anybody if you're a juror and somebody's going to sit on the stand.
Of being a juror.
You're supposed to be looking for evidence of validity or invalidity in the statements and description of what the person says and everything. Like, you're supposed to be judging guilt or innocence, whether or not this person's believable. But yeah. But you're supposed to trust rape accusers automatically. Prosecutors say that juries don't trust victims. Jurors, who are typically older and more conservative than the general population, are they saying that liberals don't answer summonses? Because that's kind of funny. Jury duty summonses. Like, I've had 4 or 5 jury duty summonses since I moved to Dayton, and I answer them, and I never get called for jury duty. So
maybe they looked up your online profile.
yeah, well, I do admit when I write out, is because they ask on the form, is there any other information we need to know, and I mentioned jury nullification. Because it's a fact. I am aware of it, and I don't trust the process with regard to rape allegations. I know that potentially exculpatory evidence is inadmissible in court because of the potential to embarrass the accuser. So I can never trust that I'm seeing all of the evidence I'm seeing. The picture that it paints is an accurate enough picture that I could vote to convict somebody. So if I were called as a juror for a sexual assault case, I would really have a rough time. Like, you'd have to have it on video of somebody attacking and subduing another person who is screaming for help and trying to get away from them. And even then, I'd have to see them peacefully walking along beforehand, so I know it's not BDSM, some kind of BDSM bullshit.
For the record, in this age of deep fakes and AI being able to create anything, I'll say this in advance. If you call me onto jury duty, not even video evidence.
Yeah, I know. You have to see their hands. If they got more than 5 fingers, I'm voting no. Not guilty, that's fake. But, or anything else weird about their hair. Like, AI can't draw hands. I draw hands better than AI, and I can't draw hands.
And sooner or later, you'll are all going to follow the Scottish model, where they go, well, okay, so we can't trust juries to deal with this, because they're going to be discerning in some way. So we'll leave it all up to the judge, who can discern what we tell him or her or zim or zer to think about.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere we can escape to, chat? Let us know. Is there any country that we can
Mars.
Mars.
But we've already been told the lie about Mars too. You have heard, right, that Mars needs women.
Of course. So it's Jupiter and beyond the infinite.
There we go. Obviously, we have to start with Jupiter, because if Mars needs women, we must pump up the volume, and Gen Xers will get that, hopefully, if they're not getting senile. But yeah, so this goes on. Why are rape convictions so hard to secure? So they're blaming juries. Then they're blaming juries' age and jurists' age and conservatism, as though being conservative makes you more likely to view a person telling the truth as a liar. Tend to have a more narrow view of what constitutes a sexual assault. Well, yeah, a conservative individual, if they are advised that there's a legal standard for what constitutes a sexual assault, they will follow that standard. They will not write in their own idea of what constitutes a sexual assault and expand sexual assault law to meet that. So it goes on. Materials distributed to prosecutors by the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, a nonprofit and field leader on sexual assault, warn prosecutors that juries are unlikely to believe victims who don't describe what they see as real rape. And this is where it starts to really go off the rails. In a real rape, the victim and the rapist are strangers. Right? Now, maybe 40 years ago people thought that, but we've had 40 years of being told over and over again by feminists that most rape is acquaintance rape or date rape. That most of the time the victim knows the perpetrator. Right. Then they go on, the rapist uses a weapon and there are wounds to prove it. Alright, well again, 40 years of being told that's not true. It's the huge campaigns across the university campuses, high school campuses, the whole public has heard this. News campaigns and everything.
At least 40 years of certain feminists telling us that all heterosexual sexual intercourse is rape. And ask yourself, how far have those termites dug into the legal system? Quite far.
Pretty far, yeah.
I would say, given that, I mean, a lot of feminists like to say that it was perfectly legal for a husband to rape his wife until 1993, which is bollocks. But to this day, it is still not a crime for a woman to rape her husband. So none of this makes sense, except in the context of the very feminists who have been eating their way through our legal system for the past century at the very least.
And by the way, when feminists tell you that it's okay that forced coitus or forced cunnilingus are not considered rape in the UK, but then they turn around and tell you that women or men couldn't be prosecuted for raping their wives in, I think it was Michigan, until 1993. It's fair to point out to them that actually they would still be convicted of a crime. If they raped their wives, they would be considered domestic violence perpetrators. They just wouldn't be called rapists. They wouldn't have the label rapist, but they could be convicted of domestic violence and be subject to years in prison. They could be forced into perpetrator programs. And as perpetrators of domestic violence, they could even be forced into sexual perpetrator programs. They just wouldn't have the label rapist.
Imagine that, ladies.
So it's not that bad, right?
And then people throw this idea up in your face, and then you hit them with the reverse. Like, did you know how many countries to this day in which women can certainly be convicted of sexual assault, even against their husbands? They never fucking are. But by law, they can never be accused of rape. They can be accused of everything. They can go up and down that whole rigmarole, but they'll never be called rapists. You explain this to someone who tried to fucking own you with that particular warped statistic, and they go, "What? I don't understand what you're saying to me." And I'm like, I'm saying what you're saying, but with the genders reversed. Because people say this without even thinking of what they're saying.
Right. And then they want to argue that it's women are discriminated against because of this factor, but they don't want to admit that if it's discrimination against women, then men are discriminated against on a higher level because it's pretty much universal. It's not just if they're married. If a woman tracks down a man she doesn't know, pursues him into his home, holds him at gunpoint, and forces him to perform a sex act on her, she's never going to be labeled a rapist under the current law. Like, that's a woman in the UK will only ever be labeled a sexual assault perpetrator. Just like up until 1993 in Michigan, a husband who forced himself on his wife would only ever be labeled a perpetrator of domestic violence. And I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? If women are just as punished without the label, then we could say that men are just as punished without the label too, right? Why don't we just eliminate rape law altogether and call it all sexual assault? Some states in the U.S. do that.
But what if the gander identified as a goose? Or is it the other way around? Can't remember.
It happens both ways.
It's just funny that we've got to the point where rather than, making all people equal under the law, let's redefine goose as gander and gander as goose and see what that does for us.
Yeah. Well, it's just as the main problem is we spend too much time policing the gander's mountain and not enough that of the goose. And again, that's a localized one. Not everybody's gonna understand what I just said. But yeah, so quote-unquote real rape. The rapist uses a weapon and there are wounds to prove it. The victim fights back and she is completely sober at the time. She cries when she tells police what happened. Right? That's all stuff that feminists have had a 40-year-long campaign. 40 years of telling the public, widespread telling the public in news articles, telling the public in poster campaigns, telling students directly in orientation at university and in high school, using mainstream entertainment media, using mainstream television news media, using music, using popular culture to tell the public these are myths, they're not true. And apparently, feminism is such a failure at everything it does that in 2023, after decades of this campaign, people still believe the myths. And people still don't know that a victim might not cry, that that rape can happen in a way that's facilitated by alcohol or drugs. That fighting back doesn't necessarily always produce visible wounds. That it's not always successful. That there are complicated things that contributing factors in a lot of assault cases. No, nobody knows any of that stuff. That's the reason people aren't getting convicted. Was somebody wanting to say something?
No.
Okay.
I'm starting to wind down, and I think Lauren has fallen asleep.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah. So she goes on. This real rape bears little resemblance to the reality of most rapes. Like, this is ancient stuff that is pretty much nobody believes what she's attributing to people here anymore. Victims rarely fight back. Now, that's not necessarily true, though, either. Like, just fighting back doesn't necessarily... The wounds you get when you fight back don't necessarily show up as, like, bruises and stuff like that. If you're wrestled into submission, you might fight back until you're physically exhausted without receiving a single bruise. And on the other hand, if you do have bruising, it might not show up until days later. Like, some people don't bruise all that easily. Other people, it shows up immediately, and it's pretty blatantly obvious. So, I don't know. But yeah, none of this is new information that people were unaware of. Most know their assailants. Many victims go into survival mode and seem emotionless when they recount their experiences. A lot of this is based on the claim that all allegations that aren't conclusively proven false must be true. The belief that they must all be true. So you have a lot of people who accuse people they know, right? And so we have this claim that most know their assailants. Well, many do, but that's not necessarily true that most know their assailants. It's not necessarily true that most don't cry when they recount their experiences. That it's true that people who have been victimized over and over again don't cry when they recount their experiences. But if you're hysterical about something, if you're terrified, most people do. Men and women. Especially if they were victimized that night or very recently. And the whole thing of fight, flight, or freeze, like I think the claim that people freeze up is used to bolster the validity of allegations that are really false, where an individual has made choices, right? She's made sexual choices and she regrets them. Now, I'm not saying that everybody that doesn't defend themselves and that experiences a sexual encounter that they're unhappy about later is not a victim, but there is a big difference between somebody physically trying to force themselves on you and you don't defend yourself because you freeze up, versus a person, attempting to seduce you and you go along with it, and then later you claim that it was because you froze up. Like, that's not freezing up. If you're actively engaged in in participating, that's not freezing up.
Yeah, if you freeze up during the seduction process, then the sex process is not going to happen.
No. No, it's really not.
The man's just going to go, okay, she doesn't appear to be interested. She's turned into a mute statue, and I'm waving my hand in front of her face, and she's not responding. So I'm going to go elsewhere.
Yeah, being doe-eyed is cute and everything, but the deer in the headlights look is not sexy.
A man doesn't make it all the way to a woman's bed as a result of her freezing up.
No.
He only makes it that far if she's been quite animated up until that point. And why would she be animated up until that point if she wasn't compliant up until that point? Oh, this is going to get clipped in the wrong way, isn't it? I'll shut up.
Probably, but you're not wrong. Like I said, there's a huge difference between freezing when you're being assaulted, when you're being your boundaries are being crossed by somebody who knows they're crossing your boundaries and they're doing it on purpose, versus in the process of seduction, when someone is flirting with you and engaging in flirtatious touch and looking for reciprocation, and you're reciprocating, and then later you say, well, I froze up. Like, reciprocation is not freezing. And unfortunately, there is a phenomenon of feminists trying to interpret reciprocation as freezing, and that's not the same thing. And you don't have the same look on your face either. Deer in the headlights is very different than doe-eyed, right?
And so, men, you need to have standards when it comes to getting busy in bed. If she just starfishes, if she just lies there like a dead fish, then maybe it means she's not up for it. But even if she is, then fuck her, she's not helping. So one way or another, that should be a sign that either she doesn't want it or she fucking sucks at it. And I guess that's the wrong word. It means she's not good at it.
It means Film Cow was wrong. Starfish doesn't really love you.
Yes. Either way, it should be a sign that you shouldn't be having sex with her.
Yeah.
Either because she doesn't want it, or because she's not very good at it.
Yep. And if you're raising a daughter, like, something that should be communicated to young women right now, right? These standards exist. This is what people are being taught about rape. Therefore, as a girl, she is responsible for communicating her interest. If she wants affection, she's responsible for communicating that she wants affection and where she wants it to stop. If she wants sex, then she's responsible for communicating that she doesn't just want affection, that she wants full-on sex. And she should understand the difference. But yeah, we are told by feminists this is a criminal justice problem. Right? When rapists, and again, this author is using rapists as code for accused men, not perpetrators of both sexes. More people, when rapists aren't prosecuted, more people are at risk of getting raped. More victims feel abandoned by the justice system and unheard by their peers. No one benefits when our system fails to properly identify and respond to a crime. That's the only truth in this whole article. No one benefits when our system fails to properly identify and respond to a crime. That includes false allegation.
I was going to say, does it not benefit the falsely accused? But I guess they said crime, but when they say crime, do they mean crime any more than when they say rapists? Do they really mean rapists? Do you know?
Yeah, no one benefits. Well, there are some people who make a lot of money when the system doesn't prosecute false allegations. So I guess somebody does benefit from that. At your expense, by the way, taxpayers. Police departments should implement better policies to address this problem. They should seek out trauma-informed investigative practices and focus on building trust with victims. Prosecutors can be bolder and fight for more convictions. So what they're basically saying here, we went over trauma-informed investigative practices when we were talking about the Title IX stuff, because that was one of the things the Title IX grifter movement, like the ones that make their materials and sell them to universities to train people in how to respond to sexual misconduct allegations on campus, their big thing was this trauma-informed thing. And there's a combination of recognition of differences in behavior between someone who is traumatized and someone who is not, and exploitation of that recognition as a means of eliminating due process, eliminating vetting of an allegation. Because due process of law isn't just you having the right to present evidence in your defense, you having the right to not incriminate yourself and stuff like that. It's not just your right to decide what you will or won't do in the court system in regard to your defense. It is also a responsibility for the prosecutor to vet the allegation for validity, believability, and winnability. Because again, as a taxpayer, you personally, as a third party, fourth party even, because you're like the prosecutor is third party, but you're even outside of that. Your money gets used to pay for this. The dollars that you have to pay to your cities, your counties, your states, through the various taxes that are applied to your income, which are a lot higher than you think they are, because you're being taxed over and over again. The money that comes into your wallet gets income taxed, and then you also get taxed when you buy things, and you get taxed when you get services. You get taxed when you pass your money on to another party because of your death or because you've paid child support or whatever. You have the shit taxed out of you, and it goes to pay for things like this. So you have the right, as the person who is financing the prosecutor's office, one of many, to know that they're not abusing the privilege of stealing money from you to run their office in order to falsely imprison other people and potentially come after you if you're ever accused in the same manner. Right? Yeah, that's your right.
They say police departments should ... focus on building trust with victims. I mean, thanks, Lauren.
that was fitting.
It was. I mean, police departments should focus on treating everyone with the same way until they've quite figured out who is a victim and who is not. I mean, surely it's the courts who are tasked with figuring out who is a victim and who is not. And until they've done that, they need to treat everyone equally. What with all men being created equal. Whoops, sorry, all men and women being created equal.
Yeah.
So just the way that paragraph is phrased just makes it sound like it's up to the police to define who is and is not a victim. And I guess in some cases it is, but if all you've got to go on is the word of an accuser and the word of the accused, then no, it's not up to police to focus on building trust with whoever they think is the victim. This is supposed to go through a court process. Like, the police certainly shouldn't be turning up to court with an idea in their head of whoever is the victim. I guess they should if they have good reason for it, but it stinks.
Yeah, you shouldn't be able to walk into a police department and make an allegation without any evidence, and that's what they go on. And like, all right, we don't have to have any evidence. We're just going to go into court and prosecute, and then the court is told that you can't doubt this allegation. So unless there is exculpatory evidence that conclusively proves the innocence of the accused, you have to convict. Oh, and by the way, they're not allowed to submit exculpatory evidence. So that's solved, right? That's not the way it should be. You walk into a police department and you make a serious allegation against another person, they should vet that allegation. They shouldn't be ridiculous about it, but they should at least be vetting the allegation for believability and validity. And if you make an allegation and you say at time o'clock on, day, month, year, date, person X was at location Y and did crime Z to me, and then the police start investigating those details, and lo and behold, that person has video proving that actually during that specific date and time they were 20 miles away from you, then that's a false allegation. You lied. That person was not where you said they were, doing what you said they were doing. Or if there's video of you in that location and the other person isn't there. Again, well, the crime's not happening in this video. What the hell? You lied. And there is no excuse. Like that's enough that, unless you can prove that you were hypnotized and convinced that something happened that didn't, and you should be able to prove that at least, then you lied. You should be prosecuted for lying. That's how the justice system protects itself. That's the immune system within the justice system against lies and against misuse of public funds and misuse of public work. You own the prosecutor's office. You paid for it. You are his employer. He works for you. And it's your right to not have that work stolen and used for illicit purposes by a liar. That's a huge big deal. People talk about the rights of the accuser. Fewer people talk about the rights of the accused. But the rights of the taxpayer are just completely ignored in this situation.
Yeah.
Are you awake, Laura?
Yeah.
That's good.
Oh, you are? So
we thought you were asleep.
You were asleep, but sometimes you wake up like halfway between a dream and reality, and you start talking gibberish. I know this because I've slept next to Lauren. Sometimes she wakes up going, "What was all this shit about you?"
Hey, it could be worse.
I don't believe you.
I claim to be president of the universe in my sleep, so I'm not arrogant or anything.
But yeah, we've had a good time, and we've nearly finished with the article.
Yes, we are.
We're in the final stretch. Let's go for it, guys.
So here's the solution this writer is offering. Right, we have prosecutors being bolder and fighting for more convictions, not justice. Right, the goal is more convictions. I want you to remember that, because that presumes guilt. This person is presuming guilt right now. But if we want fewer rapists on the streets, we need to rethink how we treat sexual assault victims. Rape victims shouldn't be terrified that if they come forward they will be called liars or slut-shamed or interrogated. Our beliefs matter. How we talk about sexual assault matters. 1 in 5 women in the U.S. will be raped in her lifetime, according to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. Someone you love is probably one of them, and she's probably paying attention. That's the end of the article. So we just had 2 paragraphs there of presuming the accusations true and demanding that they be acted upon without challenging them at all. And of course, it's slut shaming to question the whether the accuser actually consented or not. So there you go, guys. This person is advocating a system that does not vet allegations, and this was written in 2019. This is something that Allison sent me, but they've been making these changes. This trauma-informed investigation process is being used now by police departments. It's being used by prosecuting attorneys, and they're still not, in some places they're still not prosecuting because, defund the police and all that jazz. But
it's only in places like Texas,
right,
where this needs to be pushed as hard as possible. Because in places like Canada and Scotland, they haven't even needed to push it. They just gently maneuver it through an open door, and it's already the case in Canada and Scotland and in those sorts of places, and probably in California.
Yeah.
In the areas of our various countries where the feminists are leading the charge. And
boy, are they leading the charge.
Ironically, Texas might be the last place in the free world, if you can even call it that, where they can actually make this happen. Ugh.
Yeah, that is the tough thing. It really is hard to... It's becoming more and more not free. That's a whole other discussion, though. One that we'll have to thank the CIA in advance for listening to very carefully, because they do. they gotta wonder about us.
CIA.
Yeah. We don't have to worry, at least, about them being at the airports. But it would be really...
You guys have to worry about the FBI. I need to worry about the CIA.
Yeah, it's shoot, I can't think. Border Patrol. They're the guys. They don't listen to us. They don't care. Although I think we've had some shows where we've talked about how hard their job is and some of the horrible things that they have to see dealing with the United States southern border and the issues surrounding it and how it's handled. So they might like us. Who knows?
They don't. Well, not according to what Alison and I have encountered at the northern border.
Yeah. Well, and that I still kind of wonder if somebody poisoned the waters there.
With fentanyl, yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we did have somebody try to do that with regard to our hotel and everything as well. So that was kind of a fiasco.
That was afterwards. The takedown MRA.
I know, he embarrassed himself so badly too.
Yeah, that was after the Alison and I's encounter at the border.
Yeah, we don't know that that's the only thing he did. He didn't try to poison the waters with the Sheridan ahead of time because nobody was told ahead of time publicly where we were going to be. We didn't allow that information to even be known by the general public until the convention was already underway. The conference was already underway. And that prevented that kind of behavior, right? So there was that, but we don't know that he never did anything else. We don't know that.
Well, I think the reason Allison and I and Jonathan were turned away at the border of North Dakota was because we were driving with a trailer full of sort of polythene bricks,
the displays,
and
yeah.
displays, and it involved this trailer full of all these various elements, including like 100 or so polythene bricks. And I can imagine why the North Dakota Border Patrol would look at that and go, well, there could be a kilo of fentanyl in any one of those bricks.
Yeah, that's true.
So it probably wasn't even a political they were very on edge about that sort of thing. But it was no reason to ban Allison from the country for 5 years.
No,
which is
vindictive, I think.
Yeah. I guess a year or two from now, Allison will be able to come into the country, and it barely mattered because no one was allowed to come into the country until a couple of fucking weeks ago. Anyway.
Yeah. But in any case, we have finished this article. We're going to interrupt. I was going to go over, there's another 2 articles I have lined up for this subject, but before we do that, next week, I have Prim Reaper coming on to talk about an article I found on the men's rights subreddit, actually, about men's experience of postpartum depression. And it's not men's experience of women's postpartum depression. It's men's experience of postpartum depression. And it does make sense. Just thinking about it just offhand, when you have a big project and seeing a pregnancy all the way through is a pretty damn big project. It's a 9-month-long project, and you have, by the end of it, you've got a weeble to protect. Because, the mother becomes the most uncoordinated thing a human being can ever be without developing a permanent disability, or at least suffering a crippling injury. And then it's over. All of a sudden, everything has changed. You now have lack of sleep. You have a visible, incredibly visible responsibility for the most vulnerable person in the world, who is, means everything to you, and your whole focus changes. It makes perfect sense that there would be, something along the lines of postpartum depression that could happen to men in that circumstance, especially since men's brain chemistry changes in response to women's physiological changes around pregnancy. So we'll go through that article. We'll look at what the writer has to say, talk about the possibilities, and maybe some tools for dealing with postpartum depression. And it's something that I hadn't heard of it, but it does make perfect sense that this kind of thing could happen to new young fathers. So that's our next week. But as far as this show is concerned, I don't think I have any super chats. I didn't see any going through our chat, so I hope I didn't miss anything. But I'm going to look at our super chows. Where is that channel? Just sitting here waiting for the super chow channel to come up in my scrolling. Feel like Arlo Guthrie waiting for the 4-point massacre to come around. There it is. It's especially fun doing this with dyslexia. Okay, there we go. Meredith G gave us $5 and said HBR Talk 262, honey for the Badgers. Thanks for the interesting conversation. And Michael Emmerich Winberg gave us $10 and said, there's another reason for clothing to come up. And this enrages the hell out of activists. Clothing damage. TLDR, in fact, mentioned it once in a video. There was a case in which a man was exonerated of a rape accusation because the woman was wearing a very elaborate bra, which was impossible to take out in a struggle without damaging it. Another factor is the concept that when women dress in a very provocative manner, they obviously attract stares from men, thus the accusation of asking for it. Of course, by playing the conflation game, coupled with the low bar for calling something sexual assault, attention gets conflated with rape, which in turn gets conflated with the cases where a woman's clothes give proof that no assault occurred. And just like that, you can claim that women are blamed for their own rape.
This is why they didn't like that special nail polish that can change color in a spiked drink. Like when that came around, I'm not even sure if that was a real thing, by the way. But when those stories came out, feminists were like, "How dare you? How dare you? Women shouldn't have to wear these things. Men should just not rape them." And I suppose they'll do the same thing when it comes to anti-rape bras. Like, how dare you? We should have pro-rape bras. We should have bras that can be removed by fucking breathing on them, and we should have nail polish that makes it easier to rape women, just so that it's easier to convict men for fucking rape.
It's crazy.
Like so many of these jokes, they seem like jokes now, but they will become reality any minute now. Oh.
Is the tough thing, and this we could discuss for hours, which we're not going to do tonight, but there's a lot of nuance around claims that are made with regard to whether consent was given or not, and how verbal and explicitly verbal consent has to be in the context of a woman's overt, observable behavior. And, for instance, it's ridiculous to argue that a woman who pursues a man into his bedroom and climbs on top of him and has sex with him didn't consent. But feminists want women to be able to say they didn't consent, and you're not allowed to question that. And if you apply any kind of standards of evidence, like, did she bring birth control with her and use it? Did she... there are some types of panties that are made to facilitate sex without having to take them off. Panties and other undergarments, right? Did she have a negligee under her clothes instead of comfortable underwear? Then it's fair to ask why. It's not unfair to ask. If you wore something under your clothes that's made to be looked at, not made to feel comfortable and be durable up against your blue jeans and stuff, why did you select that to wear that night if you did not intend to engage in sexual activity, if you did not intend for it to be looked at? Why didn't you wear your white granny panties that night? That's not an unfair question to ask. What's unfair is to take that alone as proof, and if there is evidence of a physical assault and injuries, and or the guy used a gun, or there's evidence of being drugged, and things like that against her will, to then come along and say, well, but her panties were sexy. Like, that's not common. It's more common for feminists to interpret the other, well, this is really more nuanced. We can't be sure, we can't be convinced that, this was done without your consent, that this crime was committed, of doing this without your consent, based on your actions during that night, right? The collective actions that you took, and the lack of evidence of force or coercion or drugging or anything like that. They want to conflate that with, well, her panties were sexy, so she was asking for it. Well, her shorts were too short, so she was asking for it. Those are two very different things. Right? Evidence is evidence. Right? And insinuation is not evidence. And that is it for the Super Chows. I'm going to briefly look at Rumble. And it's still Rumble. And I don't see... Oh, there we go. I'm being told not to call it stubborn, call it persistent. No, I am a stubborn ass. I admit it. Funnily enough, back at the Women's March in Trump's inauguration, they would speak in the exact same way. I think we were talking there about because that's right after the statements about children's upbringing. I think we were talking there about the rape myths that people allegedly still believe because feminism is so bad at information campaigns. They just must really suck at that. So there we go. And I think that's it. We don't have any... I don't think there's a name for Rumbles that are paid, for Rumble rants that are paid, but we don't have any of those. We don't have any super chats, so we are done. So thanks to everybody who listened to... This was a fairly long sausage. Thanks to everybody who listened to the fairly long sausage. Thanks both you guys for sticking out the long sausage with me. And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night, all. We'll see you next week and talk to Prim Reaper.
Yay. Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.